Hey guys, I'm back to read you some more today. I didn't get through very much yesterday, so I'm going to read a little more to you today. We left off yesterday where the children told Roz, we order you to run away because she was having a hard time actually leaving because she gets connected to people, and so she kind of feels bad about leaving the Cherie family, but the kids said, Roz, it's time to go. Okay, chapter 50, The Free Robot. At long last, Roz was free, but as she ran away from Hilltop Farm, she didn't feel free. She felt something more like fear. She feared being seen and captured and destroyed. She feared for her son's safety. So Roz camouflaged herself. She avoided the fields and she kept to the trees, and with Bright Bill as her guide, she carefully crept north through farm country. The wild robot's long journey home had begun. Chapter 51, The Airship. The sun was up, and our friends were on the move. They were traveling quickly and quietly along a narrow strip of forest that cut between vast crop fields. If not for that nagging fear of being spotted, it would have been a very pleasant hike. Wind whispered through the leaves. Insects hummed and chirped. Farm machines rumbled in the distance. And then there came a new sound, a buzzing sound. Our friends hid in the underbrush as an airship rose up from the horizon ahead of them. It was a sleek white triangle flying low and fast. Roz adjusted her vision and saw familiar robots gazing out the front window. Rico 1, Rico 2, and Rico 3 had been destroyed on the island. Perhaps these were Rico's 4, 5, and 6? They're flying toward Hilltop Farm, said Bright Bill. We need to keep moving, said Roz. The airship disappeared to the south and the travelers continued north at a faster pace. They hurried through more strips of forest, passing squirrels and birds and groundhogs and other friendly creatures. But the robot and the goose, they had no time to chat. Later that day, the trees came to an abrupt end. Roz and Brightbill stood at the forest edge and faced an ocean of wheat. The wheat was still young and green. It gently waved in the wind and spread out as far as they could see. What should we do? Asked Bright Bill. We need to keep moving, said Roz, staring across the plains, but I'm not safe out in the open. There must be more trees out there somewhere. I'll take a look, said Bright Bill, and the goose launched himself skyward. Up, up, up he went, high into the air until he finally stopped and floated, just a tiny wing shaped against the blue, and then he dove back down to his mother. There are trees in that direction, said Bright Bill, pointing. It's far, about 30 minutes at top speed. Then we had better get started, said Roz. Our friends burst out from the underbrush, the robot sprinting through the field, the goose flying by her side. Roz had to concentrate to keep from slipping in the soft, muddy soil, but she stomped on, and far ahead, another line of trees slowly climbed into view. Bright Bill suddenly swooped up and out of sight as his mother kept running. Then he lowered back down beside her and squawked, The airship is returning! Behind them, a tiny white triangle rose up from the horizon. It was growing larger and louder by the second. If Roz had seen, her newfound freedom and her life would be over. If Roz was seen. She couldn't take any chances. Go on without me, hollered the robot, and she dropped to the ground. Bright Bill hoped his mother knew what she was doing, and he flew on without her. Once he reached the trees, he perched himself on a branch and looked back. His mother had vanished. The airship, however, seemed to fill the sky. Its shadow flitted across the ground where Roz had just been, but the ship didn't see her, and it detected no electronic signal, because we know that the kids had taken it out for her. So it just kept going, racing above the trees and over the next field. Its engine noise gradually faded, and it disappeared to the north. You can come out, Ma, squawked Bright Bill from his branch. A column of wheat stood up in the field. The robot had rushed her camouflage, and it crumbled off her body when she started to march. As she approached the trees, Roz looked at Bright Bill in the branches and said, We need to keep moving. Chapter 52 is called The Scout. Would the airship return? Were the Ricos hunting for Roz? Was it only a matter of time before she was caught? It was impossible to know, so our friends tried not to worry about those troubling questions. and they continued sneaking through farm country from one wooded area to the next. Roz wore a disguise of mud and weeds and bark. At the first hint of trouble, she would freeze and instantly become a rotten old tree trunk. Then she'd wait for Bright Bill to tell her it was safe to move on. If there were humans or robots nearby, she might have to wait for hours. Back on the island, Bright Bill had practiced flying like hawks and owls and sparrows and vultures. He couldn't fly exactly like those other birds, of course, but he was an expert at diving and swooping and darting and soaring. Now he used those skills to secretly scout out the countryside for his mother. He'd fly up from her shoulder and return a short time later to share his findings. "We're coming up to another farmhouse. Let's avoid it by cutting across this field. Beyond these trees is a highway. Stay here and I'll tell you when it's safe to cross. Straight ahead is a small town, but I can lead you around it." Bright Bill's advice was always good and Roz always followed it, and together the travelers safely made their way through farm country. Chapter 53, The Farm Country. During their travels, our friends passed every kind of farm imaginable. Some farm crops grew in vast fields and orchards. Others grew crops in great glimmering greenhouses. Some farms let their animals graze through open pastures. Others kept their animals confined to small enclosures. Some farms had old-fashioned barns and sheds. Others had modern laboratories that made meat and eggs and milk without any animals at all. There seemed to be an infinite number of ways to produce food for humans. The farms were teeming with robot workers, and Roz couldn't resist spying on them as she carefully slunk past. The robots worked the fields and machines and livestock, their bodies shining in the sun, shimmering in the heat. This must have been how Roz looked back on Hilltop Farm. Were any of these robots like her? Were any of them quietly dreaming of escape? Or were they all just mindless machines content with their place in the world? Chapter 54, The Mountains. The flat plains of farm country gradually rolled into hills and valleys. There were fewer crop fields and more forests. The hills grew taller. The valleys sank deeper. The farms disappeared entirely. Our friends had reached the mountains. Bright Bill floated on the wind as Roz climbed the slopes. They passed craggy rock formations and rushing waterfalls, and meadows lush with flowers. The robot could have hiked on and on, never slowing or stopping, but the goose needed to rest. As the stars came out each evening, they found a safe location to settle down. Frost was common in the higher regions, and Roz took the lighter from her tool belt and built small campfires to keep her son warm. They sat around the crackling flames, reminiscing about life on the island, until Bright Bill drifted off to sleep. As the sun came up each morning, they'd clear away all traces of their campsite and set off again, deeper into the mountains. Eagles perched on jagged cliffs. Fish splashed through gurgling streams. Chipmunks bickered in the thick undergrowth. It felt good to be back in the wilderness, but this place, it wasn't home. So the travelers kept a brisk pace. The robot adjusted her camouflage to match her surroundings. In the forest, she wore leaves and tree bark. In the meadows, she wore grass and wildflowers. In the rocky terrain, she wore dirt and weeds. Even way out there in the wilderness, she wanted to go unseen. What Roz didn't realize was that she was already being watched.